Welcome to the Smyrna First Youth Ministry podcast. We are excited that you have joined us today, where our entire goal is to send students on their journey in a manner worthy of God. We are excited that you're here, and I'm really so happy that you're going to join us for this conversation with Corey Shores. He's a worship leader friend of mine. He's the worship leader over at Canton First UMC, where we just have a conversation about worship and about what life is like in the church right now, and how we can best obviously connect with students through music, and how God is using that in order to communicate what he's doing in the world. And so I hope you will enjoy our conversation today. Awesome. Thanks again for joining us on the Smyrna First Youth Ministry podcast. Today we're very excited to be joined by a good friend of mine. His name is Corey Shores. He'll tell you a little bit about who he is, but we've known each other a few years now, and I'm excited to be able to talk to him and introduce you to the world. Corey, thanks for being with us. Tell the people all about who you are.
Yeah, we've known each other for like several years now, actually. I would call it several. It's more than a few. But yeah, I'm the modern worship leader at Canton First UMC. Great friends with Jono, godfather to his daughter Pax, sometimes Uncle Corey to Nova. So it's just a great friendship we have.
I think it's pretty great. How long have you been leading worship?
Gosh, man, now I'm going to feel old. So I think the first time I led worship corporately, I was 17, so 18 years.
Dang.
Yeah.
How long has it been kind of like, career is the wrong word, like it's a vocation, but like how long have you been a professional worship leader? Well,
I remember when I was at a summer camp, the typical youth thing. It's funny if you know me, and Jono's definitely going to laugh when I say this, even though he knows it. I was in school to be a nurse. I was going to be an RN, and not for any noble reason. I was just wanting to get college done, so I went to a 2-year college, and I thought, what makes the most money at this school? And it was an RN, which is not the reason to become an RN, and that's the reason why I didn't become an RN. But even after my first year of college at this camp, I didn't know you could be a worship leader. I didn't really know that was a calling. I grew up in a very traditional church. My dad's a pastor. But I just felt this calling of because I even had a band, and we had started playing around Atlanta some, which from where I grew up, Atlanta was 2 hours away. It was the huge city. We thought we made it. We got to play at Six Flags and opened up for Third Day. And then 3 weeks later, I felt, hey, you need to do whatever that guy's doing on stage is what you're doing. And I remember thinking, what? We just played at Atlanta Fest. Why would we stop that? But basically, I've been leading worship ever since then. So that's probably when I was 20, and then I got I've been leading worship full time since I was 24.
Okay, so you've been in front of people pretty much that whole time. What is it? This has been so surreal for me to be in a room with 10 people and singing to a camera or preaching to a camera or whatever it is. We've been pre-recording all of our services for youth on Wednesday. And it's literally just me and my phone. And it's just weird. How, from a worship leader's perspective, when you're singing into a mic and you know people are hearing it eventually or at the moment if it's live streamed. But what is that like? What is going through your mind?
Well, I'm not like your typical worship leader either, because I'm pretty and maybe I am, I don't know. But I can lean towards being insecure about things, even with people in the room. I'm the guy that when I'm not focused in, I can think, oh no, they're not singing enough, and I put that on my shoulders, right? And so I've been for a couple of years, some of the books I've been reading, the different things, have really been expressing the idea that heaven is here and heaven is at hand. And especially when we're worshiping, we are tuning into that frequency basically of heaven, and to ask the Holy Spirit to come down. But I've kind of had to put my money where my mouth is with that when there's literally the bare minimum of people in the room, because we're pre-recording also. So we got 3 people on stage, me, another worship leader, and cajon player. And so there's 3 of us. There's a camera person and a sound person, and then the preacher. So we've got like 6 or 7 people in this room. Yeah, the first couple of weeks especially, like it was really tricky. And then I realized maybe this is a great point to not be preoccupied with trying to decipher what the person in the 4th row and the 5th seat of the 4th row, why they're looking at their phone instead of worshiping. Because again, I'm wired to think that I'm not doing something right. Instead, to realize that I'm singing with all of heaven and that we're singing all these songs and try to dig into that. And that has, the past few weeks, that's made worship, even with the pre-recording, super rewarding and super fulfilling for me as a worship leader.
That's kind of cool to think about, like this, how you can free yourself of that, of like some of those insecurities. Because I feel that same way. It's like, did that person just, why didn't they laugh at that really stupid joke? Well, it's because it was a stupid joke.
Yeah, we're not stand-up comedians, right? Like, it is not our job to entertain people. We're not like a musician. Like, I love to go see, I don't know who kids like, but I like the Avett Brothers, right? And so I go to see the Avett Brothers to be entertained. Like, there's more to it, but at the core of it, that's entertainment. And so it's cool to feel the freedom in worship of remembering that this isn't even about us. Like, the weight isn't on our shoulder when we're doing it out of a healthy place.
That's right. Yeah. Like, I think a healthy place is where, and I think that's kind of all of us too. I think sometimes, so one of my gifts to the world, and you know this, one of my gifts to the world is allowing other people to feel better about their singing ability, because I really suck. And I don't know, sometimes I do that. Like, I sing louder than I probably should, definitely to the detriment of people around me. But I also want people to understand, like, it's okay to suck at singing if your heart's in the right place. And maybe my heart's not in the right place because I'm thinking of the people around me instead of God when I sing. But like, I hope people understand that that's something that's okay. Like, you can have that freedom and be healthy even if you're not that good at it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even as a guy who's a vocational worship leader, I can be insecure about the way I sing, right? Like, there's certain songs that have certain notes, and I've even gotten feedback in the past that was hurtful, that got me in my own head about things. But it's cool to just remember, no, just be free, right? Like, it wasn't a coincidence that we were called sons and daughters of God. We were children of God. You never worry about how good Nova is at, like, drawing you a picture, right? Or if she sings you a song, you would never be like, hey, Pax, that's a little pitchy, right? You're just so glad that your daughter is loving you, right? And so how much greater is God feeling about us, right? He's not up there judging he's not judging anything, much less our singing.
Yeah, I think the day that Nova and Pax tell me not to sing to them is going to be pretty tragic. Right now, they love it when I sing to them, and the day that they say stop, it's going to suck.
I mean, I love you, and I've asked you to not sing so loud in worship services. You've made me the context that we've had worship together is so across the board. But I'll say this much. High school boys that didn't want to be in a worship service chucking fruit snacks at my face, that's not as bad as your singing. People are wondering, is that a real story? It is 100% real story.
Real. So apparently, if you ever see Corey lead worship, and I'm in the same room, you can throw fruit snacks at him, and he'd rather that than hear me sing. So let's dive into worship a little bit. If I were to ask you a question, like, because I think one of the mysteries to me about God and his kingdom and what actually happens in worship. like what happens when worship is occurring. We understand worship is more than just singing or just being in a service, but what is it about going to a worship service or something, like what happens there? What is actually happening, both maybe from a theological and spiritual perspective and from like an actual practical application?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is the song "King of My Heart," but it's more of the actual diving into what that means, right? Like, if you go meet a king of a different country, what do? You bow down, right? Like, you have to show them this thing. And so to me, worship is putting the King of glory, the King of all creation, the creator of all things. He doesn't need us to give him a throne for him to have a throne, right? He has a throne. But so often I act like he doesn't. Like, I act like I'm the one in charge, right? And so to me, worship is when I say, oh yeah, God, I've been sitting in your lap at your throne, pretending like you're not there, thinking that I'm in charge, intentionally or unintentionally, right? Just worrying about so many things, different things. But now I'm going to get off the throne, go down, and just kneel down before you, give you everything I am, and sing out. Not because of a catchy tune, not because of even great written lyrics, but because of who God is, putting God in his proper place, which to me just aligns us with the kingdom of heaven, right?
Yeah, like putting him in the right spot. I always picture in Revelation where it talks about circles and everyone's around the throne, and I always like to remind myself mostly of like, I'm not on that throne. That's not me, or that's not you. Like, we gather in worship to remember that that's not us.
And there's freedom in that too. There's freedom from the problems that we knew 6 months ago or a year ago, or obviously the problems we have now, right? Like, realizing that when we worship, we're surrendering everything, right? Like the successes, the failures, the things that we're very confident in, our own abilities, but also the things that make us maybe anxious and depressed, any of those things, like giving that over to God, not in a, oh, and I'll never feel it again type of way, but just saying, God, I maybe I still feel it, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. In spite of what I feel, I believe, right? Like, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief type thing. Because Jesus got really touched when the guy said that.
Yeah. Like, it's interesting, like, especially too, when you talk about the things that you're really confident in, because sometimes it can be to the point where you're like, oh yeah, I got this. Like, this isn't gotta, like, we might not necessarily say it, but we act like, God, I don't need you. Like there are times that I get done with a teaching or a message or whatever, and I'm like, I didn't even pray before I did that. Like, that's not good.
Yeah, this is kind of different, but I'll go there. So yesterday we were recording a service, and I was a little frustrated. Just some things weren't going the way I thought they should go. I'm especially for a musician, and you've witnessed this, but I'm pretty organized, and I have my T's crossed and my I's dotted, right? And so things weren't going the way that I thought they should go. And so I just found myself in rehearsal super frustrated. And so I just stopped rehearsal. And this isn't to make me look like the hero, because I was being a jerk kind of in my mind to some of the people that maybe at the time I didn't think they were pulling their weight. They're absolutely fantastic. They were doing a great job. But I was just kind of being a brat. And so I realized that. I asked some friends to pray for me. And then after I did that, I realized, like, just stop and pray. You don't have to play any notes. You don't have to sing these songs, but pray and remind yourself of who God is, what you're singing about, and that this isn't just something we do because it makes us feel good about ourselves. It's something we do because we need it like oxygen.
Ooh, we need it like oxygen. I like that. That's especially like in the middle of it, where you can easily just get frustrated and mad and be a jerk. I've never done that before.
Well, I've definitely done it to you. Like, I remember trying to warm bands up back in the day, and I'm dealing with student bands anyway, which is like herding cats, right? And then all of a sudden, this guy walks in, "Woo, everybody, what's up?" And it's obviously, you're watching this, you know who I'm talking about, it's Jono. Or like you would grab my guitar and play it way too hard.
I don't know any other way to play it.
Maybe just don't. But anyway, but there's something like, it's finding that balance as a worship leader too, between taking it seriously, but also like a childlike dance or like play, right? There's the in between, and so having that balance is really important.
So during all this, and things are obviously different. Like, we're singing to a camera. We know people are still connecting to it. But what has God kind of been teaching you over the last month or two, just during quarantine?
Whew, a ton of stuff. So I was kind of, there's so much that I can't know. There's just stuff racing past my mind. First of all, friendships and relationships, just like the value of being able to go see a friend. Like, I remember a few weeks ago, it was really pretty. And so you and I got together and we just sat around outside for like 30 minutes. And it was just so great just to feel a little bit free, right? We take that stuff for granted. And so for me, it is that just appreciating the moments that we have, because we can both be workaholics. And so work is very important, right? Like, serving the church is huge, but being present to our friends and family, right, is bigger. I will say it's bigger.
I used to be a workaholic.
You still are, but you used to be too.
There's always that. I think it's interesting. Like, when I think about the relationships that I've developed over the last couple of months, not new ones, but the existing ones, the ones that I've gotten closer with, this has actually brought me closer to people like you and to other friends, like a smaller group of people. And I'm still processing through why that is. Part of it, I think, is because we don't have all of that they're not distractions. They're not unimportant people, but they're just not people that you fight to keep in contact with that are really super close. And this has allowed me to spend more time investing in the super important relationships. There's almost been like a revival in family dinners all over the place, which is great to hear and see. I even think about summer and what it'll look like, and like camps are canceled and things like that, but people now are taking this opportunity as a family to say, all right, what do we want to do together? And that's been really cool to see.
Yeah, no doubt.
So during quarantine, we're figuring out a whole lot of new stuff as far as what safety precautions we need to take. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the news coming out is the fear of singing in church when and if people come back. And so even the bishop of the North Georgia Conference has warned against congregational singing. But it's also a command in the Bible. You know what I mean? Like, from your perspective, how do you balance that? Like, what are your emotions? What are your thoughts? Like, how do you balance the fact that God in Scripture says we need to sing, but now that might actually be deadly?
Well, one of the things that comes to mind, growing up a Southern Baptist preacher's kid, there was a hymn that we would sing, and one of the verses said, there's within my heart a melody. Jesus whispers sweet and low, I think is what it said. But that idea of there's within my heart a melody. So I think we can sing without singing. You know what I mean? But it's still tough. Like, I was thinking about this yesterday as we were meeting and planning about potentially what it looks like in a month or two or whatever it is. But the idea, like, I've kind of gotten used to leading worship for a room of 6 people, right? But to have people kind of just staring at you with a mask on, that's going to be interesting. It's an interesting development.
Yeah. I mean, you've already talked about how you sometimes will look in the 4th row in the 6th seat and be like, why are you singing? Well,
I'm going to turn my in-ears up and just pretend like everybody's just shouting. Or we'll just play the Passion. We'll play the Passion, the newest Passion thing on Spotify, and put that in my ears and just pretend like it's the loudest noise ever. And I'll just pull a Milli Vanilli.
I've always been fascinated at in-ear monitors and what in the world is going on in there. Like, if they're like, I finally know. Like, you taught me what a click in a track was. Like, I had no idea what that was. Like, speak a little bit to that. Like, what is going on stage? Give a little bit behind the scenes of like what goes into a worship service.
Yeah. So there's all these different ways you can do it, but like for me, I really like to play with a click, just because a lot of times you're dealing with volunteers and we don't get to play together like every night of the week the way like a touring band would, and it's just so easy. So you've got basically the metronome click, which is giving you the beat so that you can feel that beat. And so everybody has their own in-ear mix also, because obviously you don't need to hear everything as loud as some things. So in my ears, if you were to have it, the loudest things are going to be the click, number one, because I don't want to think about it. I just want to feel it like a pulse, right? Click, my voice, and my guitar, because I can lead worship if I can hear those 3 things. And then from there, it's like the other singers. If somebody else is leading a song, I need to hear them to sing harmony and that kind of stuff. But it definitely is not like I'm listening to a recording. It's a lot different mix than you would. And if you're the bass player, you're going to have it's going to sound like you're pumping out the jams.
So being a worship leader, you also are pretty creative. You've shared with me some of the songs that you've written that I really love. Being able to follow you on social media, you put out some songs every now and then too. What is that kind of creative process like, to go from a blank page or a computer or whatever to here's a song? Like, how do you fit? So I write poetry, so I can kind of get the idea of the words. I get how like words flow together, but like to put that to a guitar or a guitar with drums and the bass, like all of that.
Yeah. So for me personally, the music side of it, I don't think drums and bass and all that kind of stuff. It's usually just me and a guitar, and I pick it up. But even before that, it's the phrase that we lead. You can't lead people where you've not been. And so songs have to go through what God's showing me, right? Like, even if it's a sermon series or something like that I've been thinking about and praying through. And sometimes it happens like that. Sometimes it's a struggle. There's all these different ways of doing it. But I just, the best things for me come pretty spontaneously. Like, I remember going through a really hard time 5 years ago and just praying for God to be all that he said he was. And so that led to a song called Promises that says, be all that you say you are, be all that you promise. And so once I had that song kind of wrote itself, because it was just me being very scared. I had some health problems going on. I was about to get married. I was going to take a new job all at the same time. And it was kind of like, okay, God, I said that I've surrendered some things to you, but now I'm kind of being forced to. So here you go. Please do it. Don't let me down.
I really love that song. I don't know. Is it on YouTube or anything like that? Can I listen to it?
No.
You're killing me. I think being fully surrendered to that and being fully, especially leading people where you haven't been. So like leading people through music is an interesting way to think about it, especially being able to go to that place of where is God taking the song or this people, because you got to put it in context too. Like if you're writing a song for church or for a specific church, well then yeah, you're gonna go at it in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you're writing for, I don't know, it's any kind of, you just got to know your audience, you know, and really to me, the number one thing is to be authentic to who I am, because as you can hear, like I've got an accent. There aren't a lot of people that speak the way that I speak. And 10 years ago, I tried to talk without an accent, and I tried to sing without an accent, and I tried to do all these things, but it wasn't real. And so I realized that being authentic to who God made me to be was more important, and that's the number one thing, right? Like people just being themselves is more important than trying to write a specific song. Now, sure, in Canton, we don't have the same kind of traffic as you do in Smyrna after a Braves game, right? Like I could write a song about waiting and use outside of Truist. Man, I wish it was still SunTrust, but outside of, you know, the Braves stadium, and I'm sitting in traffic, right? That could lead itself to something that people in Smyrna would be like, oh yeah. Because even if you don't go to the Braves game, it affects traffic in Smyrna like crazy. In Canton, we don't really feel about, traffic's not really that big of a deal here, so it wouldn't really translate.
Yeah. It always translates in Atlanta though.
Yeah. It takes me 4 hours to get to you just to see you for 30 minutes.
You know it's worth it.
Most of the time.
Awesome. Well, how about give us some people who are inspiring you right now? Like, are you reading anything? Are you listening to anything? Like, what is kind of speaking to you right now?
Yeah, I'm always inspired by Brennan Manning. There's a book I've decided to reread it during this time called Abba's Child, and it's just about, we talked a little bit about like that idea, right, of coming to God as a child instead of feeling like, I don't know, like the idea to me about coming to God as a child, I want to go to my dad, my earthly father, and show him like, see, I know I was that screw up that never cleaned his room and never did the chores and never did all this stuff, but now like I'm an adult and I'm married and I have a house and I own my own grill, and but I think my dad just wants me to be his child, to be his son, right? He doesn't, even my dad's not impressed. He likes the things that I've worked hard to do, but he just wants to be around me because of who I am. And so how much greater is that for God? So just realizing that God just wants you to be yourself. And so that's kind of been speaking to me.
Yeah, that's especially now, like when I think of how much worth we have always put into what we produce. Even I think it's even ingrained back into when the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt. Like it's that old, where your worth was how many bricks you made. And now like the bricks that we make are different, but like we joked about how we're workaholics, but sometimes that bleeds itself into that, right? Like I work so hard because I think that's where my worth is, and it's really not.
Yeah. We rest just in who God is, right? That whole abiding thing. Abiding in Jesus, trusting. I wrote a song a few weeks ago actually called Abide. And the second verse said something to the effect of, root my joy in all you are, God. I know the harvest comes in time. And so that's just the idea, right? The waiting, the just being, knowing that God's the one doing the heavy lifting. Like this is just the thing that I think everybody has to hear, but especially workaholics, right? Because I want to write, or I want to sing the perfect songs for my church, and I want to pick the right songs, and I can stress so much, and you want to make the right videos, and you want to make the perfect thing, because that's kind of a false self though, right? Like that's not true. That's not really, those are all good things, but when we like obsess over it, that's when it's not good. And so it's about doing our best, but not obsess. It's a fine line, right? And I'm kind of an all in or all out type guy, so it's really hard for me.
I've heard that phrased a different way sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's a family podcast.
But yeah, I think like yes, we are called to excellence. We are called to doing everything that we possibly can, but at the same time, remembering that it's not us.
Yeah.
That we can't earn our salvation. Like going back to that over and over again and reminding myself of that over and over again. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter how great I do at something if God's not in it, or that thing that I do that's really great is not going to get me Jesus.
When I think this is a Brennan Manning saying, but it really speaks to me. He says that his drug of choice is not a typical drug or alcohol, but a pat on the back. And that definitely goes to me. Like, I remember one time I was trying to get a pat on the back at a place I was at. And it basically, me fishing for a compliment, ended with this pastor telling me I wasn't a quality worship leader. And it really floored me because I was working so hard to find my identity in being a good worship leader, right? And so when this guy, because I was so sure he was going to be like, of course, don't be silly. It didn't go that way. But I'm so thankful it did because and it took me a while to get here, but it made me realize, like, I shouldn't be leading worship hoping for a man to pat me on the back anyway. When I've got a God that's given me much more than a pat on the back, right? He's given me a calling. He's given me a foundation. And he's given me a hope. That's a lot better than this.
I think that speaks to everybody. Like, God has given you much more than a pat on the back, whether you're working at a bank or working at a church or working at a restaurant. Like, I can see a lot of times I think all of us kind of fish for compliments sometimes. Reminding ourselves that those are good and it's great to be recognized for what you're good at, but God has given you a lot more.
Yeah, when I think of that contentment in being who you are, I think about my mom. And she was like, I think she was the top of her class in high school, super smart, beta club, all that kind of stuff. And she got married right out of high school. And then her and my dad had me pretty soon after that, within about a year of them getting married. So she was a super young mom and got out of college just to go to work because this was, I'm old, as we've talked about earlier. But I would talk to her as I was trying to decide what I wanted to do for a living. And I was like, Mom, why didn't you finish college or go back? And she said, well, Corey, she was praying when she was 16 for what her calling in life would be. And it came to her at a revival she was at. And she got this word. And she didn't really even talk this way often to me. We were Southern Baptists. We didn't talk a lot about like the Holy Spirit or things like that. Just in our context, we didn't. And so, but she said that the Holy Spirit told her she was going to be a pastor's wife. And that her purpose was to be a pastor's wife. She wasn't dating a guy that was going to be a pastor. She wasn't dating anybody. Really, her only boyfriend she would meet a couple of years later, and that was my dad, who is a pastor. And so she felt contentment, and she didn't need to reach a certain dollar amount of money. Obviously, she never got paid a dime for being a pastor's wife. That doesn't necessarily pay anything for most people. But she knew her calling, and she lived in that calling.
That's some encouragement right there, to know your calling and to live in your calling. Dang, that's good. I think we should probably wrap up on that. To know your calling, to live into your calling. Is there anything that you would want people to know as a worship leader? Is the last question. As a worship leader, is there anything you would want people to know who are on that other side of the screen, who are worshiping at home, who are trying to figure this out, who sometimes just turn it off because you got kids running around? Like, what do you want them to know?
Well, that's okay, right? Like, I can't imagine what it's like to try to do online worship and chase kids around. And I think just realize that God is with you in every moment, and that try to be a part of your church, for sure. you know, and I know at our church we have online small groups, we have all these things. But again, if you've got kids, I can only imagine how hard that is. We don't have kids yet, but I have friends that do, and I know their life is nuts sometimes. But just take those moments to give the throne to God, right? Even if that's a minute here, 30 seconds there, just give that worship to God. Even if there's no music playing, right? Just say, God, this really is yours. My kids are yours. This house is yours. My job, this is all yours.
That's awesome. That's a great word. Well, Corey, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate you too. I'm just kidding.
Love you, brother.
Love you too, man.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you guys so much for joining us on the Smyrna First Youth Ministry podcast. Again, our entire goal is to send students on their journey in a manner worthy of God. We hope that you will continue to check us out. We have so many great things coming up this summer, from Tailgate Tuesdays to worship in June, Zoom Bible studies in July. We're very excited for all of those things. If there's anything I can ever do for you, please let me know. We're praying for you. We love you. And may grace and peace be with you.